I started this video only intending to write about aespa and KDA, but I found myself 4 articles deep into reading about Hatsune Miku, and I knew I was going full throttle right into Vocaloid hell. So I hope you all are prepared for that, because this video will start with aespa and KDA, but to fully discuss the implications of virtual idols, we need to look at the OG virtual idols. And unfortunately, that's Vocaloid. Look, I have nothing against Vocaloids, I just didn't expect to have to read so goddamn much about them when I started making this video. Perhaps I was a bit naive, but I'm here now, and I'm ready to discuss. I've been trying to write this script so it has a neat connecting through line to it, but I just have so many disconnected thoughts on the topic that I can't seem to pull together into one coherent narrative. So this video will mostly just be my thoughts on the general topic of virtual idols and digital relationships more broadly. That will hopefully provide some really interesting starting points for discussion. Some food for thought, if you will. So with that said, let's start at the beginning. What prompted me to make this video? On October 26, 2020, SM Entertainment announced that they were debuting a new girl group called aespa. At the 2020 World Cultural Industry Forum on October 28, 2020, 이수만, SM CEO, explained the new concept of this girl group.
걸그룹 aespa는 현실 세계 멤버들과 가상 세계 멤버들이 있고요. 그 현실 세계와 가상 세계 멤버들이 서로 시켜서 하고 뭐 하는 게 아니라 서로 다른 유기체 개체로서 서로 대화를 하게 됩니다. AI 브레인을 갖고 있기 때문에 함께 SNS 라이브도 결국은 진행하면서 교감을 나누는 등 지금까지는 만날 수 없었던
Basically, there are AI versions of the members of aespa that fans can interact with, and who sometimes perform or interact with the members. They're still pretty new, so I still don't totally understand the full extent of what this concept entails, so that's gonna work for the purposes of this video. There are some hints of where SM wants to go with this AI virtual reality technology though. In May 2018, SM launched a new app called Stardate Irene that allowed fans to go on a date with Red Velvet member Irene using a VR headset. It's not crazy to think that this was a test for what they could do with the avatars of aespa, who were probably in development around this time. It's pretty clear that SM saw the success of something like KDA, which is a virtual K-pop inspired group developed by Riot Games, the creators of League of Legends, and wanted in on it. The virtual members of KDA are all champions from the game League of Legends, but there are actual real singers giving their vocals for each of these characters, like Madison Beer, Chira Burns, and G-Idol's Mion and Soyeon. KDA's virtual reality concert where the virtual idols appeared went super viral when it happened, so SM probably saw that there's something to be gained there. But amazingly enough, I'm not really interested in talking about SM's business strategy here. I'm more interested in talking about the potential types of fan interactions SM seems to be aiming for here, like the VR Irene date, and the broader implications of our relationships with technology in our increasingly digital age, not to be dramatic or anything. What exactly do we give up when we replace real humans with machines or algorithms? I had to read a book for one of my classes written by Dr. Sherry Turkle titled Alone Together: Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. It was written in 2011, so some parts are a bit dated now, but overall the core concepts are honestly more relevant than ever. The central idea of this book is that technology is seductive when what it offers meets our human vulnerabilities, and as it turns out, we are very vulnerable indeed. We are lonely but fearful of intimacy. Digital connections and the sociable robot may offer the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. Our networked life allows us to hide from each other, even as we are tethered to each other. We'd rather text than talk. Basically, she's saying the rise of social media sites and texting has taught us to keep people at a distance, and never actually get vulnerable and intimate with them. We turn to robots instead because they don't have inconvenient things that real people do, like bad moods or scheduling conflicts or bad Twitter takes. They will do whatever we want them to. They'll say exactly what we want to hear. So instead of actually putting in the effort to understand other people and improve on our real relationships, we just retreat to the uncomplicated safety of a robot who will give us the illusion of love, even though we know it's not actually capable of loving. Now, I know this argument sounds like it's veering into boomer-esque phone bad territory, but as I kept reading, I felt kind of attacked by how much I related to some of the situations she's describing. For example, after an evening of avatar-to-avatar talk in a networked game, we feel, at one moment, in possession of a full social life, and in the next, curiously isolated, in tenuous complicity with strangers. We build a following on Facebook or MySpace, yeah, this was written in 2011, and wonder to what degree our followers are our friends. We recreate ourselves as online personae and give ourselves new bodies, homes, jobs, and romances. Yet, suddenly, in the half-light of virtual community, we may feel utterly alone. Sometimes, people experience no sense of having communicated after hours of connection. As a teenager, I used to be an avid World of Warcraft player who didn't really have any friends in real life. Doing scheduled raids every Tuesday and Thursday night was the highlight of my social calendar, if that tells you about where I was in the social hierarchy. But I find myself completely agreeing with what Turkle is saying here. As soon as I turned off Ventrilo, for the kids out there that was like old school Discord, I found myself just utterly alone, sitting in my room. I felt like I was surrounded with people one minute and completely isolated the next. Now, that's a more old school example, but I think these days people are much more willing to identify with what Turkle is saying here thanks to the global pandemic. When you turn off the Zoom call with your friends, doesn't it somehow seem to leave you emptier than when you started? It's fulfilling in the moment, but afterwards, I just kind of think about how I haven't actually seen anyone in a month. One of Turkle's other points is that digitally mediated relationships can't fully replace the real thing, and in my opinion, she's totally 100% correct. I think she was actually ahead of the curve here. Personally, I used to be in the camp that online friends are real friends. But as I grew older and actually started to experience healthy friendships in real life, I learned that's 100% untrue. It's so easy to hide the less desirable parts of your personality online, meaning you'll never fully know all the intimate details of your internet friend's life. Most people who have met an internet friend in real life know this firsthand. The screen creates this weird distance between you that just can't be overcome without physical proximity. It's hard to explain beyond just saying that when you get a good IRL friend group, it just hits different, man. Not to say that if you're in a situation where it's actually impossible to make friends IRL, that internet friends are horrible to have. Obviously, I used to have internet friends, and it was a great way to socialize before I actually had any IRL friends. I just think it shouldn't be the end goal for connection and intimacy. Turkle herself even acknowledges that she might be sounding kind of boomery in her book. Technology presents itself as a one-way street. We are likely to dismiss discontents about its direction because we read them as growing out of nostalgia or a Luddite impulse, aka a boomer impulse, or as simply in vain. But when we ask what we miss, we may discover what we care about, or what we believe to be worth protecting. We prepare ourselves not necessarily to reject technology, but to shape it in ways that honor what we hold dear. We make our technologies, and they, in turn, shape us. Turkle isn't saying that technology is bad. She's saying we need to think more deeply about what we actually want from these technologies, and if they're actually able to give it to us, or if we're using it to take the easy way out, substituting real life for something easier, but much less fulfilling overall. She's saying we need to think carefully about this as we create our technologies to ensure we aren't designing something that will ultimately make us less happy and more lonely in the long run. So, as we go forward in the video, I'll probably be returning back to some stuff Turkle says. But for now, let's dive head first straight into Vocaloid hell. Hatsune Miku is probably the most well-known Vocaloid of all time. Hatsune Miku is a Vocaloid software voice bank developed by the Japanese company Krypton Future Media, using Yamaha Corporation's singing synthesizing technologies called Vocaloid. Vocaloid software enables users to synthesize singing by typing in lyrics and melody, and also speech by typing in script. I don't want to get too into the technical details here, but basically, the same way there are synthesized instruments, Vocaloids are synthesized voices. Hatsune Miku's virtual avatar was created to sell these various Vocaloid technologies. She has performed as a hologram in concerts before. An interesting aspect of Miku is that anyone can purchase and use these technologies to create a Miku song, so there's a vibrant fan community surrounding making songs for her to sing or cover.
You need to see a therapist and get off social media. Yeah, ma'am.
This creates a fascinating extra layer of fan ownership here compared to regular, real-life idols. As I mentioned, fans basically have complete control over their idol when they purchase this software. Therefore, they can make Miku do whatever they want. Purchasing the Vocaloid software essentially means they have bought the rights to their idol. It raises some interesting questions about blurring the line between fan and idol, and the boundary between artist and creator. The parasocial relationship there is kind of out of whack. And maybe that's more harmless when it's literally a fake anime girl, but if this ends up becoming a feature of aespa, that to me seems to cross a scary line and raises so many ethical questions, because aespa has actual, real people involved. Buying the My Karina vocal software might make some fans feel like they own part of Karina, the actual person. The potential for this to enable sasaengs, who are extreme stalker fans, is disturbingly high here. Just think back to that VR Irene date. Not to mention that SM already has a terrible track record with enabling sasaengs even without virtual reality. And this leads into another point. Often the companies behind these virtual idols are purposefully attempting to confuse fiction with reality, and encourage the virtual world to converge with the real world. They want fans to feel like their virtual idol could be real, or that any relationship they have with these virtual idols could be the same as real life. But think back to Turkle. Is it really the same? Or is it just accepting the illusion of companionship without the demands of a real person? It seems like, at least from my perspective in the West, Vocaloid's popularity isn't quite as high as it used to be. In my view, a more recent iteration of virtual idols is the rise of VTubers, or virtual YouTubers. They are live streamers or entertainers who, like Vocaloids, use anime-style avatars with designated character quirks and backstories assigned by a company. They also use the personality of the voice actor behind the virtual idol to entertain an audience, much like a regular YouTuber or Twitch streamer. I see VTubers as kind of a spiritual continuation of Vocaloids. While there isn't that same ownership element where fans can purchase the VTuber's avatar, that I'm aware of, there is a sense of closeness with these personalities that doesn't exist with Vocaloids. VTubers might read and respond to your comment in one of their streams, creating an extremely strong parasocial relationship that just can't exist with a Vocaloid who isn't able to interact in the same way. The ability to communicate in real time with these VTubers illustrates the intentional confusion of fiction with reality that these companies are selling to a T. They're selling the idea that anime girls are real and you can talk to them. On a similar note, Turkle wrote that, in the company of the robotic, people are alone, yet feel connected. I find it easy to see exactly what she's talking about when I look at Vocaloid concerts and VTuber streams. To be clear here, I don't think it's a problem to enjoy these things, but it becomes a problem when it's your only form of connection with the outside world, and you believe it to be a suitable replacement for real relationships. You know, the idea of the whole 2D is better than 3D meme, but unironically. Side note, finding clips of VTubers to put here is wrecking my YouTube recommended since VTubers are known for hijacking your suggestions if you even watch one video, so this will be fun. In a lot of videos and articles I read following the announcement of aespa's concept, I saw one take repeatedly. That virtual idols are a smart business move because virtual idols don't need to eat or sleep and can't be overworked. They'll never age, and they aren't prone to scandals. Unless you program them to be, I guess. Oh god, now I'm imagining a virtual idol designed to start Twitter discourse. But basically, virtual idols aren't prone to the failures and vulnerabilities of humans. Turkle also remarks upon this in her book, calling it the aesthetic inconvenience of aliveness. What does it mean when we prioritize the aesthetics of something over the authenticity and realness of it? Frankly, I'd argue we get Instagram. But going back to virtual idols specifically, Dr. Daniel Black noticed this as far back as 2008. Rather than invest considerable time and resources in the molding and packaging of a biological body in order to create a product which can only ever approximate an ideal, and which will inevitably lose its appeal as it ages, the virtual idol promises the possibility of building an idol to order, ensuring that it perfectly reflects consumer tastes and will never change. Key to the virtual idol's desirability, therefore, is its freedom from the biology which ages the living idol's body and impedes attempts to refashion it to match consumer tastes. So, while sure, maybe moving to virtual idols is smart business, I don't really care about that as a fan and as a human. To me, that is an incredibly creepy and dehumanizing way to look at this. It's weird to glorify what's good for business over what's good for people, hot take. I think idols are cool and fun because they are, in some ways, human and relatable. I like the idea that there's a real story to these people, and not some vague backstory drafted up by boardroom executives. That these people have real hopes, dreams, and desires. That they truly put their blood, sweat, and tears into making their dream happen and improve. I want the promise of real human connection for my parasocial relationships, damn it, not just some fake virtual stuff. I'm tired of that. I've had enough virtual interaction. I also see this as another way SM wants to make idols even more disposable and replaceable. They have already started trying to make idols more disposable with the whole NCT group style of rotation, where it would be easy to shuffle out members into all the complicated subunits they have, or get rid of one member without it totally affecting the group's profitability as a whole. And if you don't understand NCT's system, don't worry. I don't fully get it either, because SM kinda just gave up with NCT's concept halfway through, but they also still kept parts of it, and it's just a clusterfuck. Just don't worry about it. So I see aespa as the testing ground for this new way to make idols even more disposable and replaceable than they already are, and if their virtual concept takes off, we might see some fully virtual idols debuting in the future. And I think there are some serious problems with that, some of which I've discussed in earlier parts of this video. But I also want to talk about another problem I came across in my research. One big thing I haven't mentioned yet is, why are almost all of these virtual idols women? The majority of Vocaloids, VTubers, aespa, KDA, almost all of them are women, or at least feminine coded. Why is that? Some scholars do have a theory as to why this is, and it stems from a concept called robo-sexism. The type of robo-sexism I want to talk about is especially apparent within the otaku subculture of Japan. Otaku are basically huge anime or manga nerds and are often quite socially inept. In the West, you can think of them as kinda like the stereotype of men who choose to never move out of their parents' basement. So, as some scholars write, many straight male otaku prefer signs of girlishness as expressed in manga or anime over dealings with a real girl. You know, the whole 2D is better than 3D meme. These otaku prefer characters that are presented as girl next door yet super android, satisfying the otaku's dislike for the real body of a woman and their attraction to controllable machines. So that last sentence makes me think about how many realistic female sex dolls there are on the market compared to male sex dolls. Sure, male sex dolls probably exist, but not to the same extent and popularity as female sex dolls. But going back to the quote I just read, I want to focus on the controllable machines part. For years, the hallmark of sexism has been telling women that they must be docile, submissive, and to know their place. But in the past half-century in the West, which has more recently begun to spread to parts of Asia, feminism has empowered women to be more assertive, dominating, and in control if they want to be. Many scholars argue that the straight male desire for a virtual robot girlfriend reflects the desire to be able to control women, to make them back into that idealized, docile, and submissive wife they felt like they used to be able to have before the big bad feminists came along and ruined all their fun. As Turkle writes, people make too many demands. Robot demands would be of a more manageable sort. People disappoint. Robots will not. And, again, it's worth pointing out here, as I did in my video on Blackpink, that the majority of companies making these virtual idols are headed by men. It's hard to see virtual idols as the result of anything other than patriarchy and sexism when women are hardly in the room when designing these things. Technology and algorithms aren't neutral, as many scholars have documented. They reflect the biases and desires of those who program them. I just can't shake the feeling that there's this very skeevy undercurrent to virtual idols, where the premise of this industry revolves around the desire to control women and mold them into the perfect companion or lover. It also relies on making people, particularly straight men, feel their relationship to this virtual idol is just as good or even better than any real relationship in the real world, encouraging them to stunt any potential emotional growth or maturity in favor of the safe, predictable, undemanding virtual relationship. I personally think it's a bit scummy to just lie to people like this, even if it's what they want to hear when it emotionally damages them in the long run. So I want to end this somewhat disorganized video by asking a question to you all. In Alone Together, Turkle predicts all the way back in 2011 that we are in the midst of a robotic moment. She explains, "The robotic moment does not mean that companion robots are common among us. It refers to our state of emotional, and I would say philosophical, readiness. I find people willing to seriously consider robots not only as pets, but as potential friends, confidants, and even romantic partners. We don't seem to care what these artificial intelligences know or understand of the human moments we might share with them. At the robotic moment, the performance of connection seems connection enough." Based on everything I've said in this video, would you agree with her? Are groups like aespa and KDA proving her point that we are more willing than before to accept the performance of connection over connection itself? Perhaps she was a bit ahead of her time here. I think the rise of things like VTubers and AI chatbots would only strengthen a lot of the points she makes in her book. Part of me feels like people are more willing than ever before to proclaim 2D is better than 3D and retreat into their uncomplicated virtual relationships. But at the same time, I feel like the pandemic has really gotten into everyone's head that nothing can replace real connection. If there's one thing being stuck inside all the time has made us collectively realize, it's that virtual simulations of connection really can't replace the real thing. Perhaps that has somewhat reversed this robotic moment that seemed inevitable 10 years ago? I can honestly see both sides of this argument. I lean towards the idea that the pandemic has helped people realize how important real connections are and how virtual connections can't replace it. But I also wonder if, because people have been forced to turn to these virtual relationships during the pandemic, think of the boom in Twitch streaming, I might even dare to call this the mainstreaming of simping, we might become too comfortable with virtual relationships even after the pandemic. We've seen how easy and uncomplicated things are with robots, and once we return to the real world, with our rusty and out-of-practice social skills, perhaps we will end up running back to the robots and one-sided virtual relationships for comfort. I'd also be curious to know what you guys make of groups like aespa and KDA after presenting all the points I've made in this video. I do think that KDA is kinda different from aespa in that it is based on an already popular IP using already popular singers, and that accounts for their popularity more than any unhealthy parasocial relationship with the KDA members themselves. I don't know anybody who stans KDA in the same way people stan other K-pop artists, if that makes sense. But I could be wrong here. But with aespa, when these real human performers are mixed together and presented as equal counterparts to their digital selves from the get-go, that to me seems deeply troubling and potentially unethical. Their identities are tied up into these virtual machines while the artist's voice in KDA already have their own separate identity. But I don't know, I do feel like my thoughts on this just keep going in circles. Subscribe if you like this video and want to see more analytical content like this in the future. Other than that, see you in the next video. Bye!